All right, Clippers fans. This is a rough time for you guys. Kawhi Leonard suffering that knee injury. He's out for game 5. Now, earlier on, we heard that it was a knee injury. However, some of the recent reports have said that it's most likely an ACL injury. It's not 100% confirmed, but for what they're hearing, it's an ACL injury. And depending on how severe this injury is, Kawhi could be gone for the rest of the postseason, which would just be horrible. But right now, let's at least look at it as a knee injury because not everything's 100% confirmed. When more information comes out, we'll talk about it. But, you can look at it as a knee injury. You could take their word when they're hearing an ACL injury. However you want to go for it, however you want to go. But we don't have complete, 100% information regarding what's actually going on with this injury. So we'll hear about it later on. Whenever the information comes out, we'll talk about it. But either way, Kawhi is out for game 5 tonight. That means all of the pressure has been put on the shoulders of one man. Not just the pressure, but the hopes of the Clippers fans. It has all been put on one man's shoulders. Paul George. Paul George, the lone superstar, must find a way to carry his team to the conference finals. Because if the injury isn't as bad as we're thinking it is, and it's just like maybe a sore knee or just something like that, then Kawhi could probably come back for the conference finals, which means if PG can hold it down and get him there, they should be fine. Now, if he's out for the rest of the playoffs, I'd say your championship chances are over. That ends the championship run right there. But they could probably still make the conference finals. It all depends on Paul George. Now, Paul George can't be the only one showing up in this game. He's going to need help, which is why 2 players need to show up. You can't have one player show up and the other don't. No, both of these guys need to show up. Marcus Morris, Reggie Jackson. You two both need to show up. Now that Kawhi's not playing, both you guys need to show up and you both need to ball out to help Paul George. But Paul George has to be the catalyst. He has to be the one to set the tone and carry this team to a win tonight. And hopefully they can get a win in game 6 and close us out. Because if he cannot do so, it's over because Kawhi's not coming back. Kawhi is not coming back for this series. So most likely he's not coming back for this series. He's most likely done, depending on how severe that injury is. So it's up to Paul George to carry this team. And I got to tell you right now, this means so much more than just Paul George having to show up in a crucial game like this. Paul George has an opportunity to erase and just quiet all the hate and the troll and the basic cyberbullying that people have been throwing his way over the last couple years. Now, I've been one of the people that's been critical of him. I haven't trolled him. I haven't hated on him. I haven't said he's the worst player I've ever seen or something like that. The most I've ever said about Paul George is he's the worst or the most inconsistent co-star I've seen. He's still a star, no doubt. Don't question his talent. He's still a star. However, if you were to choose out of all the co-stars you could see in the league, if I was to make a choice, he'd probably be last on my list because I can't take the inconsistencies that I've seen from him. However, recently, he's starting to play like his old self from his Indiana days. And if he can continue to play like that, and he can play like that tonight, that's a difference maker. Because you see, this whole situation regarding Paul George and the hate and trolls he's been getting, all accumulated to one phrase he said, playoff P. This goes all the way back to 2018, first round of the playoffs, where he's sitting there and he tells the media, y'all ain't met playoff P yet. That was that matchup between the Thunder and guess what? The Utah Jazz. And we all saw how that situation went down. We all saw what happened in that game 6 in Utah, which was one of the worst performances for Paul George. That was an awful performance for him. And because that happened in Utah, the hate began to come on. And it's been happening ever since then. That's why he has all these titles. Playoff P, Pandemic P, PG 13%. You've been hearing all these hate and talks about him. All these names about him. And people have been hating on him since this Jazz series. How ironic. You know what happens? Next thing you know, he goes to the Blazers series. And he plays well in that series for the most part. He wasn't consistent at times, but overall he played well in the series. But at the end of the day, people, they looked at him and said, Damian Lillard hit that shot over you. And then you made the comment, that's a bad shot. And it's like, that just adds more fuel to the fire. And then, of course, we know the whole 3-1 choke that you and Kawhi were responsible for last year against the Nuggets inside the bubble. So it's been rough for Paul George when it comes to the postseason. So now he has the opportunity to pretty much silence that. Because when you look back on his Indiana days, Indiana Paul George was something different. This man was showing up in the playoffs every single year. He had some legendary battles with LeBron James in that Miami Heat squad. I know, I'm a Heat fan. I saw those battles. He had some legendary battles, man. So we know what he can do. We know he can be consistent. Indiana Paul George can be consistent. And Indiana Paul George was one of the main guys, if not the main guy, leading that team. So we know Paul George, tonight's situation, he's been in this situation before. Now, it's been several years since he's been in this type of situation because he wasn't in that situation the last couple years. He's always been the co-star. It was all the way back in his Indiana days when he was that. So it's been several years since he's been in this position. But he has been in this position before. And he has gotten the job done for the most part. Not against LeBron and the Heat, but in other situations. He's gotten the job done and shown up for the most part. He has to do that tonight. And what a statement that would be for Paul George if he was able to do that tonight against the Utah Jazz in Utah, the same place where all of this started. Because Game 6, 2018, first round, Thunder Jazz. That Game 6 performance was the beginning of all of this. And now, tonight, he could have an opportunity to completely rewrite all the hate that's been said for him. If he shows up and he balls out in game 5 and wins this game and takes them back to LA with a 3-2 lead and they end up closing the series and going to their first ever conference finals, that's a wrap. No one can disrespect Paul George. Even me, somebody who's been critical of him being inconsistent, I will sit up and tell you, man, round of applause. The man himself, he's done it, and he's back to his old days of how he was playing when he was with Indiana. So, Paul George, is up to you, man. Tonight, gotta do what you gotta do. Honestly, I feel like if Paul George tonight shows up, balls out, drops like 30 plus, and he helps his team win, I think we gotta add another nickname to that, because, I don't feel like we should call him Playoff P or any of the other Ps they would give Playoff P, Pandemic P, PG, 13. No. I don't think we should call him Playoff P if he shows up tonight, balls out, and they win in Utah. I feel like we got to give him a new title. Or better yet, go back to his older days. I think if he wins tonight, we got to start calling him Indiana P. We have to be like, Indiana P is back. That's so corny, but it is what it is. So is Playoff P. Come on. It's corny as well. But Indiana P will be back. If he shows up and balls out tonight, then he needs to be branded Indiana P. Because Indiana P plays like this. Indiana P is going to go out there and play like a star. Because Indiana P was doing that in Indiana when he was taking on my Heat team and taking the 7 games and stuff. So we know Paul George has been in this situation before. So if he can come out tonight and carry this team, not only will he destroy all the narratives that have been coming out against him and all the hate and all the troll that's been going towards his way, he would also show that he's back, man. He's really back. He's back to playing like a superstar in the postseason consistently the way he was when he was in Indiana. So the pressure's on tonight. No Kawhi Leonard. You're the lone superstar. You've been in this situation before. This is what you were doing when you were in Indiana. It's your chance now, Paul George. It's your chance now. You're going to have to carry this team. And once again, I have to say, he's going to need some help. So I'm looking at these other 2 guys. Marcus Morris, you got to show up. You showed up in Game 4. You got to show up in Game 5. And I'm not really worried about you. I expect you to show up because you're built for these moments and you've been in these moments several times throughout your career. So I expect you to show up, and I believe you're going to show up. Reggie Jackson, I have a little bit of concern for you because you haven't really been in a lot of these moments. However, I will say, so far, this postseason, you have been showing up. I mean, Dallas, you showed up. Moments in this series against the Jazz, you showed up. So I have a little bit more worries for you as opposed to Marcus Morris because he's definitely been in these situations and he's shown up. But still, you've been showing up this postseason run. So I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and say both you and Marcus Morris show up tonight, which leaves it all on Paul George to be the lone superstar to carry this team. If this game is close down the stretch, I need Paul George to do the same thing he did in Game 4 tonight. Game 4, he closed that game. He closed Game 4. I need him to do the same. If this is a close Game 5, Paul George has to close the deal for the Clippers. If he can close the deal, if he can come up clutch, if he can play like a superstar the same way he's been playing the last 2 games and get a win on the road in Utah in a crucial Game 5, then I think all the hate and narratives we've been saying for him, they'll disappear because Paul George, 3 straight games, would have been balling. And in a crucial Game 5, without a Kawhi Leonard, he shows up and leads his team to victory on the road against a tough Utah Jazz team. If Paul George pulls that off, I think he silences his critics. He silences the narratives. And even me, somebody who's been very critical of his game because of the inconsistencies I've seen in key moments of the game. If he shows up tonight, round of applause. Like I said, I got nothing against Paul George. Again, I like the guy, and I do believe he's a superstar, and I love what I see from him in the regular season. That's why it hurts me when I'm watching him in the playoffs and he's not performing that same way. However, the last 2 games, he's been fun to watch because he's been playing that way. And if he can play like that again tonight, in a crucial game like this, and he can get the win, I'll have nothing bad to say of him. I had nothing bad to say about him in games 3 or 4. And honestly, if he completes this, I think it's time to call him Indiana P. Because Indiana Paul George will be back. Because this is exactly what he was doing back in the day. So, PG, it's all on you, man. Tonight, can you carry the squad? I don't know. With that being said, we'll see what happens tonight. That's all I got, and I'm out of here, man. Peace.